Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Dana Scranton, and welcome once again to The Pursuit of Wisdom and our ongoing series on the 6 basic human needs. Today, we're going to be talking about connection. Now, prior to this, we have talked about certainty, change, and growth, how they are basic human needs, and how they are all interconnected, no pun intended. But I want to reiterate here, we're now starting on the second half of the 6 basic human needs. But I want to go back and talk about why we're doing this. Okay, the 6 basic human needs have been used for many years in the entrepreneurial space as a means of personal development, personal growth. They were originally developed by Tony Robbins, from other sources, for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and other psychological theories and ideas and practices. And they are functional. And over the years, they have morphed. I'm one of the ones who has morphed them. I have changed some of them to make them more applicable to what it is we do as entrepreneurs. But they are invaluable resources for us to understand how best to serve our marketplace. Now, we here in Entrepreneurs Without Limits tie these to the 6 elements of human wellness. And why do we do that? The reason we do that is because the needs themselves are foundational, they're fundamental. But each of these needs is subjective to the individual. In other words, the individual defines their needs. And oftentimes, in fact, most of the time, those needs really have to do with the 6 elements of human wellness. And within those 6 elements of human wellness, there are a myriad of subcategories within each of the elements. And that's where we as entrepreneurs have fertile ground to make a difference in the lives of others. So that's why we're doing this. What I am doing in this series is not giving you an encyclopedic dump on each one of these needs. What I'm doing is I'm giving you ideas to invoke thought, creativity, to explain some of my thoughts, ideas, and theories, to allow you then to extrapolate on those, adapt them, and create your own means of applying this theory, this idea, this practice of using the 6 basic human needs tied with the 6 elements of human wellness. So that said, let's get into it. Let me pull up the slides and we'll dive right in. Okay. Well, first of all, let's get some interesting definitions here. When we talk about connection, okay, Brene Brown, who is a noted psychologist, professor, speaker, book writer, um, she tends to operate in what I call the touchy-feely mode, an invaluable mode for many people. Her definition is this: I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. I'm just going to whack that right there. Okay. So that definition is true. I mean, when we think about it, most people think of connection in these terms. I call it touchy-feely just to kind of categorize it. But what it really means is people want connection that reinforces their beliefs, their ideals, supports them, makes them feel loved. That's quite normal. That's the foundational element of connection. But there are other areas, if you want to call them tangents of connection, that the entrepreneur needs to think about. And I want to bring some of these to your attention so that you think of connection as a means of fulfilling the needs of others. And that a means does not necessarily mean that, for example, which was defined by Brene. Here's one that's very allied to that. The great gift of human beings is that we have the gift of empathy. In other words, we identify and we understand the needs of others. We empathize with others. We feel what others feel. We find a synergy between what we feel and what they feel. That gives us the ability to better understand because we put it in the context of who we are. Okay, that's very close to what Brene identifies, but let's go to the next one. Human connection is the key to personal and business success. Now, that almost sounds self-serving, doesn't it? Like, I'm going to connect with you because I want something from you. But that's not necessarily true. If you put it in the context of the definition of entrepreneurship that we use, human connection is your process of identifying and understanding what others need so that you can then connect them with a means of fulfilling their need. And in the process, your business grows. Whether it's your product or not, you create a relationship. You create another path to a future opportunity. That opportunity is not about, let's go to the next quote, greed. The currency of real networking, read that, the currency of creating connections is generosity, not greed. And that fits into the entrepreneurial mission. So you have to be very careful about getting entrained into believing connection is all about the touchy-feely spiritual side of life. It is to many people, but it is not always the path that you want to take to achieve the means of fulfilling people's needs. As an entrepreneur, you have to extrapolate to understand what connection means in the context of your business, okay? So here is the definition of entrepreneur, and I just want to remind you of this. Now, my apologies to those who have seen me reiterate this, restate it on a number of occasions, but there are people viewing this presentation that have not heard my definition of an entrepreneur, so I want to just repeat that here. An entrepreneur is someone who identifies and understands the needs of others, and with courage, conviction, and resourcefulness, connects those people with a means of fulfilling their needs. Now, A is the key word. It's, it's right, okay, right there, okay? Now, what do I mean by the key word? Well, a means. It doesn't mean the means. In other words, if you happen to have a product and it's supposed to do a certain thing, but when you talk to the individual, you'll find that, well, my product may or may not work, but I know of something that may work and it's not coming from your business, it's coming from someone else's. You nevertheless have a responsibility as an entrepreneur to connect those people with that possibility. In so doing, you create a friend, you create a connection, okay? You create an understanding that then puts a seed in your mind so that the next time you hear that same kind of need, you start thinking about maybe you should have a solution to that in your product portfolio. But ultimately, it's all about elevating others. That's the trick. So that's what these 6 basic human needs are all about. All right. Now, having read those definitions, I'm going to put a but on that. Connection is not necessarily about connecting with people all the time. There are situations where that connection is not about people. Okay, so different forms of connection are apparent, and we come into this by connecting the 6 basic human needs to the 6 elements of human wellness. So today we're going to connect connection with those, and you'll see that there are depths, there are differences, there are variations, and those variations are entrepreneurial fertile ground. Okay. As entrepreneurs, the degree to which we facilitate connection influences our success. The connection that you facilitate has to be appropriate. Now, let me just give you an example. Let's say that we're talking about social media as a means of facilitating connection, since that's one of the most popular ways of doing it in today's world. Let's take 2 different sides of the same idea. You're dealing with a community. As you talk to individuals who are in your marketplace, you want to create a community to keep them close to you. So you create a community, a Facebook community, and it's all about, let's say, health and wellness, and you lob people in there, you connect them. But in that community, there's a lot of tangent discussion, some complaining, some griping, some support, some ideas. Every now and then they talk about your product and the benefits they get from it, and others, diss it. And then on the other side, there's a community that is focused on one thing, health and wellness, of a given product, and that community is tightly monitored and controlled by you in there facilitating the discussion about the improvement that each person has, how they use the product, and you limit the discussions. You are very active in directing the community to focus on each of the individuals of the community, elevating the others through their experience with the product. Now, it's not to say that you throw people out of the community if they start talking about other things. But the point being is you establish a culture of that community that is reinforcing the health and wellness objectives of the individuals. It does not become a community where anybody can come in there just to lob ideas around because they need to scroll and interact on a social media community. So these are two different ideas. So when I say the degree to which you facilitate connection influences your success, that's what I mean. Now, allied with that, as the entrepreneur, is because you have a given product or product set or series or portfolio of products, you understand them better than the common person. So once you understand the needs of others, you've identified and understand it, and you've determined how they are connected, how your product can elevate their lives, you then design connection experiences that create synergy among others and with your product. You see what I'm getting at here? This is allied with the prior statement on entrepreneurs, the degree to which we facilitate connection influences our success. You design the connection to achieve maximum synergy. Now, that is requiring a little bit of creativity, but you put together a community, and that community targets achieving the results that people need from connection. Now, connection does not just have to do with connection, right? As we go back and we look at those other definitions, and I'm going to show you a definition here very shortly, an idea of what connection is, and you'll see what I mean, that you can design a community to facilitate connection for synergistic reasons. Okay. Now, we strive for and thrive on connection as human beings. All right. There's no doubt about that. And so these topics here, these ideas, and I'm not going to go through and read all of these because it would be a very lengthy read, but I'm going to leave them there. You can come back to the video and watch them. This is a collection of ideas around why we as individuals have connection as a top priority. Okay. Belonging for emotional support. That's a big one. In today's digital disconnected world, people are finding the need for emotional support. That emotional support can come in the form of a community. All right. It's a fundamental reason. Emotional security or safety. Now, emotional support and safety are very closely allied. And with that, validation. People want validation that they're okay, validation that they matter. And all of that folds into a sense of identity. Now, these are psychological, and they may not necessarily equate directly with your product. So you have to think of it in terms, like I said at the very beginning, designing a community that achieves a synergistic outcome. All right. Now, connecting with others that helps us understand, to feel understood, that we as humans are part of something larger and that we contribute to that, which, by the way, is coming up, right? That's the next basic human need. When we connect, we look for the opportunity and the benefits of contribution. Then there's social activities. This is all part of feeling more human, being fulfilled. And the need for connection is so deeply embedded into our genetics that it's a need for fulfillment and completion. So connection is something that we strive to facilitate. And we don't need to get into the deep psychological aspects of it, but understanding all of this can help you create a better connection experience. Okay. Now, consider this. This is, earlier I made a statement that connection is not always about connecting with people. Well, here is an example of that I'm going to go into. The opposite of connection is isolation. But have you ever thought that The need being fulfilled through that isolation is, in fact, a form of connection. Now, up here where I live, every now and then you run across somebody who lives off the grid by design. They live off in the woods, up on a mountaintop somewhere, and they wander into civilization once in a while to get provisions, and then they quickly depart. They don't see other people, they don't interact with other people. They are perfectly content where they are. But does that mean they're disconnected? Their connection is with themselves, trying to understand who they are, what they believe, what the world is all about. They connect with nature, they connect with wildlife. That form of connection is kind of almost asynchronous with entrepreneurship. How would you connect with somebody like that? Well, to the entrepreneur who deals with off-grid products, yeah, that's pretty much how you do it. You recognize that there are people whose connection may be with themselves, maybe with their family, who is isolated off in the woods somewhere. That's what they connect with. So connection is not always about connecting with a larger group of humans. It can be about connecting with that fulfills your needs at this particular moment in time, at this period in your life. Okay? So just keep that in mind. It doesn't always reside in another person or a group of people. Okay, so all of that said, connection is a seed of opportunity in many, many ways. Okay, it can be a process where people discover new ideas, new thoughts, things they've not thought about before. They discover people who can now facilitate for them achieving their desires and needs, or people they can contribute to create a greater outcome that makes them, in fact, feel more connected. Connection contributes to fulfillment of needs, of certainty, change, and growth. Okay? Think about that. This is the hierarchy. Remember what I've said in the past episodes. People strive for certainty and they move away from uncertainty. So they're always looking for ways to minimize uncertainty and maximize certainty. To achieve that, they have to change something. Otherwise, that situation will just perpetuate. So change is a means of moving people from a state of uncertainty to a state of certainty. That change invariably, inevitably produces growth. That growth produces new thoughts, new ideas, new capabilities, and pushes you towards connection as a means of facilitating and perpetuating growth. Then connection, as we'll get to in the next episode, connection fosters the desire to contribute on a greater scale. Okay, having said that, that's the hierarchy. Okay, so each of these six basic human needs, if you look at it in this way, builds a progression to the next human need. And when you combine them all together, then you have what we call life, we call humanity. All right, so let's get right into it. Six basic human needs. All right. Now, the certainty we've talked about, change we've talked about, growth we've talked about, connection in the context of everything that I've just related to you. We will now overlay that on one example, one category example with the six elements of human wellness, which are shown here on the right. So connection, here we go. The benefits of connection fall into several categories. And before we move on, I want to just cover these just very briefly. Look, I'm not going to read these. Okay, this is fine print. I did some research and I basically pasted in the research that I found, edited. I've changed the words to be more congruent with what we're talking about. But I'm just going to read the top level categories before we move into talking about the elements of human wellness. Emotional support and well-being. We've already talked about that. Sense of belonging and community. Okay. That we talked about, and it's important. That's where most people land. Increased happiness and life satisfaction. In other words, the byproduct of a group. When you go out with a group, you go out and have a good time playing golf with your favorite foursome, you feel pretty good. Well, that's a means of connection. Personal growth and development. Sometimes when we get with more people, we'll call it a mastermind, the outcome of a mastermind is greater than what the one mind could accomplish. So personal growth and development can be a powerful byproduct of connection. Now, support during crisis and recovery, that's a big one. And that is not something that most of us entrepreneurs get involved in. We kind of leave that to the medical and the psychological community. But the point being is we have a role in that. We can facilitate that to a certain degree. Okay. Strengthened resilience and coping mechanisms. Well, again, that's kind of psychological, but what that really boils down to is a community where people can feel like they're understood and they can receive support to keep going in the area of recovery, revitalization, and so forth. Enhanced communication skills. I have known individuals in my life, being an engineer, who were the classic nerds. They had pocket protectors, they had a calculator on their belt, and they really, really shied away from human connection. They were fine if there was a computer in front of them, but when it came to human connection, they were very awkward. So there's nothing like being connected to improve one's communication and social skills. All right. Greater trust and cooperation. One of the issues that some people have is trust. They don't trust others. They've been burned. They've had their lives ruined by something, and they just have a lack of trust. So when you join a community, sometimes you have to determine whether or not you trust what that community is all about. Cooperation. Cooperating with people sometimes is a function of trust. You don't cooperate if you believe that they're not trustworthy. So communities that build trust and cooperation is another one. Physical health benefits. Okay, that's what many entrepreneurs are into, health and wellness. Increased longevity. So how does that happen? Well, there's a lot of research out there and you can dig it up on your own, but having human connection, or going back to our discussion about the off-grid folk, when you have connection in your life that makes you feel better, relieves stress, makes you feel better about yourself, eliminates the issues, the emotional issues, physical issues, and so forth that would otherwise reduce your longevity, then you have achieved a desirable outcome. And for many, connecting with other people is a means of being understood, emotionally accepted, having all those stresses and strains of life move away and be dissipated because of the connection with other people. For example, if you're in a community that's full of very positive thinkers, that's a benefit to the person who is constantly walking around with a cloud over their head. Okay, so just wanted to go through those very quickly before we get into this. So let's get into 6 elements of human wellness. So, not the example that I cited earlier, notwithstanding, most people avoid isolation. They want to avoid isolation because it creates a situation where they have all those negative thoughts and feelings that perpetuate and they rattle around in their mind. And unless they get out and connect with other people, the world as they define it is what's inside their head, and they need to get that flushed out. Connection is a way of doing that. They desire connection. The 6 elements of human wellness, well, they're shown here. And those elements are always pervasive in our lives. Every one of these is something that we seek to fulfill and to maximize. So my questions, and each of these needs that we talk about, I have these 3 questions that we're going to go through right now. Here I've picked relationships when we talk about connection. That's not always the case, but it's the one that made most sense. So let's go through the questions. When my need for connection of relationships wellness is fulfilled, and then you go down the list. Let's take emotional. My emotional state will be better, same, or worse. We ask this question so that we can better understand the value of connection to the individual. So first you ask that about yourself, and then you move it so that the individual you're dealing with, you put in your mind that the avatar, the persona, the market representative that you're talking about, that you're dealing with, you ask this question as if you were them. And then you determine where in this hierarchy, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, or financial, in this case, you ask that question. If connection were facilitated, would their wellness, being fulfilled, be better, the same, or worse in these categories? Makes sense. It's a little weird. It's a little different approach, but it really gets you thinking. So here's the opposite question. When my need for connection of relationships wellness is unfulfilled, my physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, or financial state will be better, the same, or worse. So this is the counter question. So what you're saying here is, okay, if my product fulfills their need for connection, and it may not, I mean, look, there's a chance that it won't, but remember, you're the entrepreneur and you can design a connection experience to go along with your product. Just saying. Then you ask that question, if it's unfulfilled, what does that mean? Because it's two sides of the question, right? You're advocating you can be better off, more fulfilled if you connect with XYZ. That's the positive approach. The negative approach, which is oftentimes used in the media, which is you're unfulfilled. And because you're unfulfilled, these other areas of your life are just absolutely miserable. But wait, there's more. Buy my product and all of that goes away. Well, okay, that's the late night television infomercial approach. But the reason you ask this question is because you want to go to the other side, right? You want to look at, okay, what if it's not fulfilled? Because now these are new ideas and concepts that you can apply to your marketing and to designing that community, that means of connection that is synergistic. And then finally, this connection. When there is no connection in the state of my relationships wellness, and then you go through this list, okay? There's no connection in your relationships. There is no connection in your physical wellness. There's no connection in your emotional wellness, your intellectual, spiritual. Basically, what you're saying here in this question is if I remain unconnected, in other words, I'm apathetic or I just don't care, what does that mean for my state of wellness? Satisfied, apathetic, or dissatisfied? Okay, this is kind of an abstract question. But the reason you do this is people will tend to look at these 6 basic human needs that we're going through. And some of them, they'll just say, well, I don't have that need. I don't have a need for connection. I don't have a need for contribution. I don't have a need for certainty. Well, if that need does not exist, it's not fulfilled because they don't care, then what does that mean? To them, they'd say, well, I don't care. What does it matter? It matters to you, the entrepreneur, because there are people who don't know about that particular need. They may have it, but they don't know about it, and they don't equate physical wellness, emotional wellness, and so forth with the absence of any focus at all on that particular need. So that's why we ask this question. Excuse me. So here's the deal. When your product influences the attainment of a desired outcome, question, what are the connection benefits and benefits of those benefits? Okay. Your product has the ability to change somebody's life. Now, again, what is product? Product is goods, services, and leadership. Your leadership may be the product, right? So when your product influences attainment of the desired outcome, when they achieve what it is that that product was supposed to do that they desire, what are the connection benefits and the benefits of those benefits? Okay. Now that they've improved, now that they've achieved something, that's an opportunity for connection. Some people call those testimonials. But you want to connect to them to a means of expressing their satisfaction. Okay. Connection is an individualized state. And you got to understand that. That's crucial. Not everybody has the same idea of what connection is valuable. And we've talked about that. Design your strategy to fulfill the target need. Okay, now be cautious not to become the connection. Okay, again, I'm going to go in here and just fix that right away. Okay, not to become the connection. Why is that? You deal with a marketplace. Now, you may be a solo entrepreneur and you deal with individuals, and those individuals in turn deal with other individuals, and the summation of all of that is a marketplace. You may be marketing to the broad market. You're not dealing individually with people. But you want to be very careful not to become the connection. Why is that? Because when you are the connection, you do not have the energy and the resources to become the connection to a lot of people. Unless that connection is in a means where you have a firewall between you and the rest of these people. Okay. Now, it's not bad. You want to be connected to your marketplace. That's part of your strategy. But your strategy is not to become bogged down in individual interactions. You want to create a connection strategy that connects people with the means, a means, but in this case, your means of fulfilling their needs. Create, design the strategy, the community. Okay. Now, looking forward to the next episode, connection sets the stage for contribution. And that is very valuable to the entrepreneur. Okay. You want to know, what does contribution look like? What does it feel like? And what do you appear as to the individual who is receiving contribution? Because you're going to ask the question on their side, when I am connected, when I am certain, when I have changed and grown, what contribution can I make to the greater whole? What contribution can I make to the community of which I am a part? So we're going to talk about that next. But this is the reason that the 6 basic human needs are so very important, because they are interconnected. All right. So that's the end of today's episode. And thank you for being here. I appreciate the time you've given to watching these episodes. And I am getting feedback and private messages that are valuable, and I am trying to address those questions as we move on. All right, well, that's today's episode. Once again, thank you, and we'll see you out there on that frontier of opportunity where things just open up new possibilities for you and for the world as a whole. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.